Welcome in to another episode of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we have a couple of games to discuss. So, sorry for the delay in recording this episode. If y'all listened to the last episode, you'll know that I was sick, so I was trying to wait until my voice was better to record this episode. So, hopefully, you guys are able to watch this. If you're trying to watch it before the A&M game, I am going to be putting this out on Saturday just before the game. So, again, sorry for the slight delay. I will obviously record a little quicker next week. As you can tell, my voice is more back to normal. Sickness is still kind of hanging around a little bit, but I'm much better than I was when I recorded the last episode. So just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a heads up as it relates to that. But obviously, we have to discuss a couple of games. Alabama got a 20-point win on the road at South Carolina. And then Alabama heads to College Station today to actually take on Texas A&M. So we're going to talk about both of those games. I also waited because there's an injury report we need to talk about as it relates to the A&M game that will impact the game. And then we'll get out of here. So first things first, want to talk about the South Carolina game that happened on Wednesday. For those of you that watched the pod, my prediction was somewhere like 85-69, I think is what I officially put out on my thread before the game. Really, the game was about like I expected. In the end, right? At the beginning of the game, Alabama was really clicking on all cylinders as it came to the first half. At the very beginning of the first half, they had a slow start. We talked about that in the post-game space. I think that part of the reason behind that is I don't know if Jaron Stevenson is the best offensive weapon to start the games. I understand why he's in there from a defensive perspective, and he does give us a lot from a defensive perspective. But I don't know if the spacing is quite there when you're running him, Nelson, and Cliff together. So we had a little bit of a slow start to start the first half. Alabama ends up picking it up, ends up playing pretty well, and then Alabama ends up, going up. I believe it was 17 at the half. Then Alabama comes out second half, again another slow start, and Alabama went on some shooting slumps. There were some 50-50 balls that maybe went the opposite way, or just everything just wasn't going and flowing as smoothly as it was in the first half, and that caused Alabama to only win this game by 20. Alabama probably is about if they're playing their best, they probably could beat this team by 25-30, and probably should have in this game, right? I even put out a tweet kind of middle of the game or toward the end of the game, like, hey, I don't know if my score prediction was high enough, and then it was almost perfect, right? If it wasn't for Aiden Sherrill 3 to in the game, I would have been 1 point off. And I think that overall that Alabama just has to learn, and Nate's talked about this at length, has to learn about how to keep your foot on the gas on defense and on offense when you're up, right? There was a moment that a lot of people are going to talk about, and there's been a lot of talk on Twitter about it. Nate was even asked about it, where he did a 5-for-5 platoon swap, right? He was mad at his starters when they came out in the second half. Like maybe 2 minutes into the half, he immediately does a platoon swap, brings in a whole brand new 5. Then, maybe a minute and a half into that, Darion Reed does not get back in transition. He calls timeout and meets Darion at midcourt, just railing him, right? Really screaming at him. Darion obviously takes the coaching very well, pats Nate on the back. Nate even said after the fact that it apparently also was on Chris Youngblood, and that Chris had owned up to it in the film room when they were talking about it after the fact. But Darion was the one that really got laid into during the game, and it was Nate really trying to set the tone and be like, hey, no matter what, we can't take plays off on defense, and this is what we expect. To note, Darion did not get pulled after that, right? Nate called the timeout. Nate really laid into him, but Darion did not get pulled after that. He played for like the next 5-6 minutes. He ended up getting pulled later, but it was more of just, getting him rest and, normal rotation style pulling. It was not a situation where he was pulled due to the issue that happened on defense or the lack of coaching or whatever, right? It was Nate just, getting him the rest as you typically would with a player when you're as deep as Alabama is, right? I think in this South Carolina game, it was, from South Carolina's perspective, it was exactly what we expected. They just did not have the scoring missing Miles Stute. They really couldn't do a whole lot from a scoring perspective. They end up going 3 of 14 from three. They shoot just 50% from two. Jacoby Wright, was their leading scorer with 20. Nick Pringle, to his credit, had a pretty good game, in the return against Alabama. They had to play some guys that don't typically play a lot. And we knew that was going to happen, right? Especially missing Studi. And they have a pretty thin rotation. Right? So because of that, they had to play some guys that are just not accustomed to playing the amount of minutes that they need to play. And in general, South Carolina, I think, is just going to be undermatched this season, right? I think that South Carolina is going to be near the bottom of the SEC this season, with or without Studi, right? And I think that it's just going to be a situation of this team is going to be clawing to try to see if they can make like the NIT. If they were to go on a run, could they make the NCAA tournament? Sure. But I do think it's going to be pretty tough. South Carolina also has, one of the only like kind of bad losses so far this season against North Florida early in the season. That's one of the only like truly bad losses that the conference has. And so I do think that South Carolina is on that trajectory to definitely lose some more games. They also have an absolute brutal stretch coming up. It obviously started with Alabama, but they play Auburn next week. Today actually. Vandy, Oklahoma, Florida, Mississippi State, Georgia, A&M, Kentucky. Right, they have a very, very tough schedule here at the very beginning of their conference slate. So I do think that eventually South Carolina may figure something out and may be able to go on a little bit of a run toward the end of conference play. But I think that without Studi and the type of schedule which they have early season, I think it's going to be really, really tough for Carolina to get the wins that they're going to need to try to make the NCAA tournament. So I do think this is like an NIT team at best. And I think that's where Carolina is going to be for this season, right? The things I do want to talk about when you're looking at Alabama that I thought that really, stood out about it. Alabama actually shot pretty well from three. We talked about this in the pregame video. Was Alabama going to be able to put up a ton of threes, right? When you look at South Carolina, they don't give up a lot of threes. They're like 10th in the country at number of threes they allow like you to take. And it happened, right? Alabama only takes 19 threes in this game. They go 8 of 19 though, right? So 42%. If you've seen the percentages Alabama's been putting up this year, you will absolutely take 40%. And because of how good they are from two, it actually would not surprise me, especially missing Wrightsell, and we'll talk in a minute about how we're also probably going to be missing Millette for the rest of the season, or potentially. Missing some of your better three-point shooters, it would not shock me if Alabama's three-point numbers this season don't need to be closer to 30. They need to be closer to 25 because you're so good from two and you're shooting such a high percentage from two that you just want to take your absolute best three-point shots and then really, clean up on the inside the paint and in the glass because that's where Alabama's been most successful this season. Another game, Alabama shoots 60% from two, not even close to one of their best from 2-point, but against a really good front court in Nick Pringle and Colin Murray-Boyles, you'll take it, and Alabama wins this game, right? So, like I said, that's the big ones you want to talk about. I think that if you're going to look at people and like, hey, this specific player played really well for Alabama, I think that there's 2 to 3 people you look at. Number one is Aiden Holloway, right? And I put out a tweet, and I truly believe this. When Aiden is playing his game and is playing within himself, he's as good as it comes, right? There was a moment in this game where he took like a bump, like to give himself, I don't know why he took the bump. I don't know if he was trying to draw a foul or what. Ends up putting up a three, nothing but net. He did take a couple of mid-ranges. The first one he made, so Nate left him in. The second one he missed and immediately got pulled. So not sure what that was all about, but, obviously we don't want him taking a ton, especially the type of mid-ranges he was taking. But, it happens. It's not the most surprising thing ever. When somebody gets in their zone and gets feeling it, it would not shock me if that happens. But Aiden Holloway, again, I think that the speed at which he can bring, the finishing he brings around the rim is really big, right? I know Jacob Pickle put a tweet out about it, about how the big difference in Aiden from last season to this season is actually the 2-point percentage. If you look at Aiden's 2-point percentage, last season it sat at 34.5%, or sorry, 35%, 34.9. This season it currently sits at 60.5, right? That's just an absolutely huge difference. And when you're looking at a guy the size of Aiden, that ability to finish at over 60% from two, that's just huge, right? And so I think that's really the spot that when you look at Aiden, obviously he's one of our best 3-point shooters, but what he brings near the rim is also really, really important. Then obviously you got to talk about Mark Sears, right? Mark Sears is looking like the Mark Sears All-American that we thought he could be and should be. He started slow early this season, but this is the Mark Sears you know and love. 22 points. Really didn't feel like he was playing with he was playing within himself the whole game, right? He gets 6 assists. He did have a couple of turnovers in this one, which I know last game he had 10 assists and no turnovers, but 16 assists to 3 turnovers in the last 2 games. You'll live with that. Mark is just back playing to the guy that we know he can be, and it really feels like he's letting the game come to him. I do also think it's helping him a little bit to not have to play the 40 minutes he was playing last season. He did this in 30 minutes. He was the only guy to play over 23 minutes on the team. So I think that his ability to not have to play the amount of minutes and to not have to because of the substitutions that we have, I think that that's really, really big for him. And then the other guy that I want to mention is Cliff Amore, right? Cliff, over the last couple of games, I think is really starting to learn what Alabama wants to do with him from an offensive perspective, like rolling to the hoop with more slams. And I think that he's just becoming a little bit more productive from an offensive perspective for Alabama. And that's huge, right? When you have somebody that can catch the lobs, that can roll to the basket, that can help rebound. He leads the team in offensive rebounds with 3 in this game. I think that that's something that you really have to talk about because that's something that will help Alabama throughout the season, right? Especially, he was big playing against Colin Murray-Boyles and Nick Pringle in this game, but you're going to continually face better and better big men throughout the course of the season, right? Janai Broom's on the schedule. You've got plenty of other guys on the schedule, and Cliff getting more comfortable not only from a defensive perspective, but from an offensive perspective, will allow you to play him more in those games. And I think that that's something that Alabama's going to need because I think that Alabama is at its best when Grant Nelson's at the 4, right? That's the really important thing is Cliff playing lets Grant move to the 4, and he's a mismatch against almost all 4s. And since he's that mismatch, you really need to be able to play Grant or be able to play Cliff. Obviously, Aiden Sherrill is somebody that also can give you some minutes. I know Mohamed Diabate was also really, really, really big in this game in his defense against Colin Murray-Boyles. Diabate as a small ball 5 was still playing Grant at the 4, also is really helpful. But at the end of the day, the importance of Cliff, the importance of Mo, the importance of Aiden at times is to be able to play Grant at the 4 because as an offensive weapon, Grant at the 4 is so much better than Grant at the 5 as an offensive weapon, right? Grant has the ability to defend the 5s at times. We saw that last season in the Final Four run, but his offense is much better when he's going against 4s. So that's all I wanted to talk about when you're looking at the South Carolina game. I know that gives us a little bit of an idea as to what I think happened and how Alabama was able to win this game and be successful. But we're going to move on to the Texas A&M game, and then we'll get out of here. Well, I actually have one more thing I'm going to mention, and then we'll get out of here. So Alabama moves on to College Station to play Texas A&M today. And the big news out of College Station is that for the second game in a row, they will be without leading guard Wade Taylor. And this is obviously for anyone that's followed A&M or has followed SEC basketball for a while. This is obviously really, really big because Wade Taylor leads Texas A&M, and I was going to pull up his stats right now. He leads A&M from scoring and is really just their do-everything guy, right? He currently leads them in points and assists. He averages 15.7 points, 4.8 assists, is a 90% free throw shooter, 33% three-point shooter. He's not a super efficient guy. That's the thing that everybody talks about when you look at Wade Taylor. He takes a lot of shots, but Wade Taylor also is that guy where there have been games where he could take over the game and really just put the team on his back. The concern that I have when you look at A&M without Wade Taylor is where does the offense come from outside of the offensive rebound, right? Now, they are going to get some offensive rebounds, right? This is the best offensive rebounding team in the entire country. They will get offensive rebounds. And I think when you say best in the country, you need to put that into perspective, right? Currently, A&M is number one in the country in offensive rebound percentage at 44.5%. For reference, Tennessee is 11th at 38.5%, right? So they are 6 percentage points below, and they're 11th. Alabama's 18th, and we're at 37.5%, right? So that 6-point percentage is actually the difference in 116th, right? From A&M to Tennessee is the same from Tennessee to 116th, right? So A&M is just so incredibly good at the offensive rebounding game, right? They are almost 3 points better than second place, right? This is a historically good offensive rebounding team. This is what Buzz Williams is, right? When you look at Buzz Williams and you look at a Buzz Williams coach team, they may not be very efficient from a shooting perspective, but they absolutely crash the glass. They will bully you on the glass, and if you do not watch out, they can beat you because of that, right? And I think that's what you need to note when you look at A&M, because the shooting stats are not gonna wow you, right? They're shooting 31, just over 31% from three, just over 50% from two, 70% from the line. Their effective field goal percentage is under 50. They turn over the ball a little bit. But the big difference is they get their own rebounds. And it doesn't matter, as Nate says, it doesn't matter how efficient you are on your first shot when you get two more, right? Because at a 44% rate, almost one for every two, they're getting their rebound. So how to play against this team is simply put either one of two things. You either have to, I don't want to say one of two. You need to crash the glass, obviously, but you also need to know that they're going to get rebounds. And Nate talked about this in his press conference. This team will get rebounds. They're going to get offensive rebounds. You're not going to keep them off the glass the whole game. It's just not going to happen. Nate goes, we play against teams that are really bad offensive rebounding teams. They're still going to get a couple, right? That's how basketball works. Inevitably, you're going to get a couple. The fact that they get the offensive rebound is not the problem. You still have to play good defense, right? At the end of the day, the offensive rebound does not count for points. It just gives them another possession. So as long as your defense does not break down on your second possession or your third possession when they get the ball and get a second and third chance, then you're okay, right? And I think that's what, if Alabama can lock into the defensive scouting report, I think that's the place where Alabama can actually be successful in this game. Because without Wade Taylor, if you can keep, if they have to catch the offensive rebound and really go back into the flow of their offense, they can't just get the rebound and go straight back up with it. I think Alabama has a very good chance at playing defense and keeping A&M from scoring, right? As well as scoring enough on our offensive end that they have to press a little more, right? Because if A&M starts having to take three-pointers, you get longer rebounds, and that's a less likelihood of A&M getting the ball. They're not a three-point shooting team. That's just not who they are. Um, and that's something that you have to look at. When you look at the game against Oklahoma, right? So, and that's the other thing that we'll note. And it's interesting because this early in the season, Oklahoma has played 15 games. 5 of those games have been against common opponents with Alabama. They've already played Oklahoma, which obviously Alabama just played. They've already played Rutgers and Creighton and Oregon and Purdue, right? This is a team that has played multiple of the same teams that we've played. The reason this is really important, obviously, is you can look and see what the teams that we've played did successfully because we've actually seen them close up. You can see what they didn't do successfully, and you can see what would or would not work against a team like A&M. And I think that that's going to be really, really helpful coming into this game. Obviously, completely different from the standpoint of in all of those games against Oklahoma, they did have Wade Taylor. So I think that when you're looking at how to defend A&M, you have to also take that into consideration. But I do think that that is a data point that you can look at for this game. When you're looking at this game also, I think that the thing that Alabama just has to do is sit down and defend. Simply put. I think this is going to be a big game for Mohamed Diabate. I think this is going to be a big game for Darion Reed. I think this is going to be very similar to like our Houston game, right? From a physicality standpoint and a rebounding standpoint, I think you're going to have to fight on the glass similar to how you did against Houston. I think that's going to be one of your most important things from a rebounding standpoint, and it's going to be to win it all possible to get your rebounds and to keep guys like Anderson Garcia off the glass. Guys like Solomon Washington, Henry Coleman, these guys that Alabama fans, they've played A&M the last few years. You know the names. They've been the same guys for the last couple of years. They're all incredible rebounders. And they are a Buzz Williams coach team, simply put, right? At times, Nate has struggled playing against Buzz Williams. I know most recently, Alabama did win against A&M 100-75 last season. And then the season before that, Alabama wins the SEC title over A&M in Nashville. So Alabama, obviously, and Nate and Buzz Williams have a lot of experience against each other. This is not a situation where this team is going to throw something at us that we've never seen before. Buzz Williams coach teams are Buzz Williams coach teams, right? You know what you get out of them. And so I think that this is a situation where if our guys can lock into the scouting report, if our guys can lock into what they have to do, and also if our guys can understand that even if you get up in this game, you have to keep fighting. And the reason I say that, Oklahoma led the game against A&M fairly large, actually. Let me see if I can pull up the actual lead they had at one point. At one point, Oklahoma leads this game 32-20, 30-16. So it looks like they had about a 14-point lead. At half, the lead was 9. Then it balloons up to about a 15-point lead, 51-36, with about 17 minutes to go. A&M ends up, coming back, winning the game, and ends up coming back, taking the lead, winning the game. And they do it on the back of their rebounding, right? The thing we talked about at the beginning. This last game, they get 47% of their offensive rebounds, right? They get 17 offensive rebounds compared to just 8 for Oklahoma, right? Now, we do know Oklahoma is not a good rebounding team, right? So Oklahoma is a bit of an anomaly. We saw that when Alabama played Oklahoma. But Alabama has to fight to keep them off the glass. And if you get a lead, you start making shots, you get a lead, you have to pretend that the game is 0-0 because their ability to get rebounds can shorten that gap so quickly, right? Oklahoma really felt like they relaxed when they got up so much, and it likely cost them the game, right? Oklahoma has Bryson Gooden go 9 of 11 from three. Just absolutely blazing from three. 9 of 11. They shoot 58% from three, and they lose this game. And again, they lost this game in large part, partially due to Zurich Phelps, the other guard for A&M. In Wade Taylor's absence, they're now leading scorer for the game or for the season. If Taylor's out, Phelps has 34 points, right? So he's obviously a huge reason. He goes 6 of 10 from three. But the other reason is, simply put, A&M just pounded them on the glass, right? So that's what Alabama has to pay attention to, and that's the reason why Nate Oates has been preaching it in every game this season. Is if you get a lead, you have to put the team away. Because you're going to get up against teams like this that can make you pay if you don't. Right? So that's the big thing that you have to note when you're looking at this game is, can Alabama put a team away if they get up? Right? Also, can Alabama defend on that second and third chance if A&M gets the rebound? Because again, the rebound does not equal points. And Nate's going to preach that all day. He's been preaching it all week. The rebound isn't points. They still have to go up and score, right? So just keep your defense solid, and it will be okay. And then lastly can Alabama make shots? Because again, if you watch that Oklahoma game with how A&M and Buzz Williams like to gamble from a defensive perspective, there's going to be open threes. There will be. There's going to be some open shots that are available in this game. Can Alabama hit them? If Alabama can hit the open shots when they're made available to them, if Alabama can take care of the basketball, right, not let the defense of A&M get into you and get you flustered, and if Alabama can make the open shot when they've been made available, Alabama should be able to win this game, even in College Station. I do think this is going to be a very close game, and I think that because of A&M's rebounding, right? I do think that Alabama, if you had to tell me one team is going to win by 10, I think that I would go with Alabama. But if you had to have me wager, I think that this is a 5-point game or less, just due to how well A&M can rebound and how good their defense is. I know they don't have Wade Taylor, but there's something about the rebounding that just kind of cures all. And, if you tell me that Phelps has a really bad shooting night and Alabama wins kind of going away, sure, I would definitely believe that. But I think that it's not something I would rely on if you're having to have me pick this game. So I think that this game is going to be a score. Let me go somewhere like 82-77, maybe. Like I said, I think that A&M is going to be able to obviously rebound the ball. I think that Alabama, having faced Houston and having faced some other teams similar to this earlier this season already, is going to know who they need to play and how it's going to, guys like Modi and what it's going to take to be able to beat a team like this. Obviously, how this game is called may also impact the game slightly. Because when you're getting really physical going after rebounds, if the refs are calling it really ticky-tacky, it could lead to a lot of free throws in this game. Ideally, that they let them play, and this is like an Alabama-Houston game, and it doesn't get up into a crazy amount of free throws. But just be warned that if the refs try to insert themselves into this game, it definitely could be. So that's what I'll say. Like I said, I'm going to give it an 82-77. Final score, and I think that Alabama does win. I think Alabama starts 3-0 in conference, and Alabama gets ready to play Ole Miss in Coleman Coliseum on Tuesday. So that's what I have. That's what I wanted to talk about. The thing I was going to talk about, I'm actually going to leave for the episode that's going to come out on Monday. I think I want to give it a little extra time so that I can do a little extra research on it. So this is what I'm going to talk about. I want to talk about how Nick Saban was just announced into the College Football Hall of Fame. It was announced yesterday that he was going to be inducted in this year's class. I think that I wanted to do a little bit of a conversation about that. as well as I want to do a conversation about Houston Millette, about how Nate Oates is looking into a potential medical redshirt for Houston Millette regarding his knees. So that is what I'll talk about. I'm going to talk about those in the next episode. So if you have any thoughts on those or any questions or comments, throw them down in the bottom. Like I said, I will read those. And then, like I said, when I put out the episode that's going to come out on Monday that I'll record tomorrow, I can discuss that and we can go from there. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Sorry for the delay in this episode, as I mentioned. But thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.